Imagine sitting at your kitchen table, opening a letter from your landlord. Rent is going up. Again. He calls it market rates. What he means is he can, so he will. And you sit there doing the maths. Another £75 a month. Another £900 a year. Money you will never see again. But here is what that same letter never tells you. The money already sitting in your savings account right now in February 2026 is enough to buy an entire house in parts of Britain. A real house. With a garden, in a town with a train line, where your monthly payment would be lower than your current rent. 10 towns, 10 opportunities. Most renters never find out they existed. Shildon, County Durham. The name does not travel far outside the northeast, but the numbers here are impossible to ignore. In February 2026, the median sale price for a house in Shildon scrapes in at just £101,000, less than half the national average. Terraced homes, the bread and butter of the town, still change hands for as little as £73,000 according to Rightmove. For renters used to handing over £995 a month in London, the local market feels almost fictional. The typical two-bedroom rents for £560, but the same property, bought on a 95% mortgage, comes to just £398 a month. That is a difference of £162 every single month, or nearly £2,000 a year, money that, for once, stays in your pocket. A composite profile of first-time buyers here shows the deposit hurdle has shrunk. With lenders like Nationwide now offering 95% loan-to-value deals, a buyer needs just £5,000 to £7,500 down. For a saver putting aside £245 a month, the deposit is within reach in 30 months, less time than most spend on a single rental contract in the capital. Mortgage advisor Sarah Patel confirms the numbers. The 10% deposit myth is breaking down. With 95% products, first-timers can get on the ladder, but they must plan for hidden post-purchase costs. In Shildon, the maths is brutally simple. The rent trap is not a law of nature, it is a postcode lottery. And here, the ODDS are still stacked in the buyer's favour. But for how much longer? Burnley, Lancashire. The headlines say it is still a buyer's market, but the numbers tell a more volatile story. In February 2026, Burnley's median house price stands at £131,000, up nearly 5% from the year before. The average rent for a two-bedroom is now £624 a month, but a 95% mortgage on the same property would cost just £511 a month. That is a monthly saving of £113, or over £1,350 a year, if you can actually secure a deal. The problem? Demand is no longer steady. Local estate agents report a flood of remote workers arriving from Manchester and even London, chasing bigger homes and lower living costs. One agent describes a weekend where 28 viewings were booked for a single terrace. Within 48 hours, 5 offers landed, one at £148,000, a full 15% over the asking price. The property was gone before Monday, sparking a wave of frustration among local buyers. It was like a frenzy at a football match, says Laura Whitaker, a Burnley homeowner. For every buyer who locks in a bargain, 3 more are left watching prices slip out of reach. Investors and newcomers are driving weekend bidding wars, and the old rules about slow-moving northern markets no longer apply. The last cheap houses in Burnley are now a moving target, one that is getting harder to catch with each passing month. Sunderland, Tyne and Ware. On paper, the numbers look promising. There is a median sale price of £144,000, average rent at £693 a month, and a 95% mortgage coming in at £560. That is a potential saving of £133 every month for buyers, if only it were that simple. Beneath the headline figures, the council's 2022 rebanding quietly pushed 15% of local homes up a tax bracket, adding £12 a month to household bills. By 2026, some families are paying £30 to £40 more each month, once you factor in higher council tax, pricier utilities, and the loss of free school meals after 2 primary schools closed. Library hours have been cut in half, and bins are now collected fortnightly instead of weekly. A housing officer reading from the latest council minutes puts it bluntly: "We are paying more to get less." The gap between rent and mortgage is shrinking, and the supposed advantage of buying in Sunderland now depends on whether you can absorb these extra charges. For many, the sums no longer add up so neatly. Middlesbrough's Teesworks Freeport was sold as a once-in-a-generation economic engine with a £2 billion public budget and the promise of thousands of permanent jobs. But a close look at the numbers tells a different story. Freedom of Information tables reveal that, by February 2026, more than £1.5 billion has already been spent. £560 million on port infrastructure, £480 million on a logistics hub, £300 million on commercial space, and hundreds of millions more on cultural venues and green upgrades. Yet the jobs ledger shows just 1,200 permanent roles delivered so far, only half of the 2,400 trumpeted in the 2023 launch. Union representative John Harker says the promise of 2,400 jobs was a political headline, and the reality is that many of those positions are temporary construction roles. For local families, the Freeport's impact on housing affordability is ambiguous at best. Rents have edged up to £585 a month for a 2-bedroom, while the mortgage on a similar property is £585 a month. There is no saving at all. Billions have been spent, but the benefit for would-be homeowners remains hard to find. Stoke-on-Trent stands out for a different reason. The city's £90 million master plan has written a rare line of defence for local buyers. Hidden in the council's planning documents is a 12% quota, hundreds of new-build homes reserved for first-timers and residents, each offered at a discount below market value. The average sale price in Stoke now sits at £149,000, with a typical mortgage on a 95% loan-to-value deal costing £598 a month. That's nearly £100 less than the city's average rent for a 2-bedroom, which has crept up to £695. For those who qualify, the set-aside means a foot on the ladder with a smaller deposit and a monthly payment that can finally undercut rent. A city planner, flipping through the latest housing report, explains the intent. "We've ring-fenced these homes so they don't get snapped up by outside investors or buy-to-let landlords. It's a window. Once they're gone, they're gone. The master plan's protections are temporary, and as new investment pours into the city centre, pressure is building. For now, locals have a brief advantage. But with regeneration spending already at £90 million and demand rising, the clock is ticking on Stoke's last affordable new builds. Greenock, Inverclyde. On paper, it looks like another Scottish port town with houses under £130,000 and rental yields brushing 8%. But a closer look at the land registry extracts for PA15 reveals a very different story. Since 2024, just 3 overseas funds, Global Property Fund, Scandinavian Pension Trust, and European Real Estate LLC, have snapped up 145 homes between them. That is nearly half the private stock in the district, all quietly consolidated in bulk deals at £130,000 to £140,000 apiece. Vacancy rates have been sliced in half, from 4.2% 2 years ago to just 2.1% now. The result is local tenants are left scrambling for what is left. The Greenock Tenants Forum puts it bluntly: "We do not know who owns our roofs anymore." Short-term licences have become the norm, and annual rent hikes are running at double digits. For would-be buyers, the window is closing fast, not because demand is surging from families, but because corporate portfolios are squeezing out the last fragments of local control. The pressure is not just on prices, it is on the very idea of home ownership in towns like Greenock. Cumnock's property listings look like bargains. Terraced homes for £86,000, some even lower. But the real cost often arrives after the keys are handed over. Local council records show buyers facing average hidden repair bills of £9,700 within the first year. Common culprits include asbestos removal at £3,200, full rewiring for £2,500, and mandatory energy performance certificate upgrades to meet new standards, another £4,000 gone. Which magazine housing advisor warns that skipping a thorough survey can turn a cheap home into a money pit? In towns like Greenock, budgeting for repairs is not optional, it is essential. Even the best mortgage deal can unravel if you do not plan for what is lurking behind the plaster. The Hawthorne family's story in Wigan reveals how pooling resources can flip the script on the housing crisis. With £16,000 in combined savings, they used a shared ownership scheme to secure a 40% stake in a terrace priced at £75,000, putting home ownership within reach for Lucy, the youngest generation. The savings didn't stop at the deposit. By living next door, childcare costs dropped by £6,000 a year, while elder care expenses for Joan fell by £10,000. The family's cafe saw a boost too, as free help from Lucy and Ben replaced paid staff. For the Hawthorns, owning together isn't just shelter, it's a safety net. Barnsley's £130,000 median may not last long, with planners warning that HS2 hype and new rail links are already driving up demand. In Hull, a £380 million waterfront master plan is transforming the city, but locals point out the new flats come with prices of £197,000, far above what most can afford. A Hull community activist says regeneration is supposed to help us, not price us out. The window for true bargains in these towns is shrinking fast. Right now, the average UK renter pays more in rent each year than a 5% deposit on houses most never see advertised. As regeneration schemes and investor demand close in, these windows shrink by the month. The chance to escape the rental trap isn't theoretical, it's expiring. What will you do?